Hi, I'm Ray Suhi. I teach here on Lessonface.com, and today I'm going to show you 5 tips to improve your soloing right now. These tips are going to be, for everyone from beginners to intermediate players to even advanced players. And these are kind of like fundamental techniques that will just help you sound better right away when you're improvising or you're crafting a solo. One of the biggest things you can do when you're improvising first with this scale, most of us learn the A minor pentatonic scale first. I'm sure we all know that. Now, what we want to do is focus on the root notes when we improvise. We have 3 different A's in that scale. 5th fret on the E string, 7th fret on the D, and 5th fret on the high E. Now, if you base your phrasing around those notes, it's going to sound stronger and more resolved than if you would around the other notes in the scale. So here's our A chord, right? So if I play around this root note on the D string, constantly go back to that root note and you feel that pull of kind of the homeness of it. Simply, if you just play the note above the root note and the note below the root note, you'll get some pretty pleasing sounds. Also, if you bend those notes a little bit, you'll get some really nice sounds as well. And that applies to every root note in that position. Now you can do this with any scale that you want as well. So say if it's something a little more exotic like an A Lydian scale. Right? Those notes are A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, G sharp, and A. Same thing there. If you have a scale like that and you don't really know what to do with it at first, just kind of play around the root notes. Hit the note above the root and below the root. Just find your way back to that note. One good exercise for this is just to play the scale and stop on the root notes as you get to them. If you do that, your solos will have kind of this melodic pull and kind of sense of like groundedness that you need when you're soloing, just to make it sound like you know where you are in the song or you know where you are in the harmony. The next tip I can give you is to add vibrato to notes, especially when you're sitting on them, when they're long notes. Right? This adds a lot of color to the sound and a lot of expression. Your vibrato on the guitar is your personal kind of sound and feeling that you put in. If you listen to anyone from Hendrix to David Gilmour, they all have their own unique vibrato. So let's talk about that really quick. Again, we're using A minor pentatonic. And I'm going to vibrato the 5th fret here on the G string. Now, a couple tips for vibrato. One of the first things is hand position. Okay? It's very tough to vibrato if our first finger is curved way up in the air and our thumb is back here. Now, it's not impossible. Some people do this. It sounds pretty good. For me, what I find most comfortable is to lock the side of my left hand finger, the first finger on my left hand, to the side of the neck like this. And then I'll take my thumb and hook it around here. Now that's not too necessary. It's more important to lock this first finger. The next thing you want to do is lock your first knuckle here on this finger as well. If this is flat or kind of flopping around while you vibrato, kind of lose control of the note. But if you keep that locked, keep this side there, what you do is you kind of pick the note and fan your hand out, just like this, in a nice and slow and even manner. That's the next thing about vibrato I can add, is that as long as it's a nice steady kind of quaver, it's going to sound good. If it changes speed in the middle of the kind of note, it will sound awkward and uncertain of itself. Sounds kind of funny, right? But if it's nice and even, it really starts to sing. Okay? All right, see, sometimes my thumb unhooks, right? And the whole point of this motion is that kind of fanning of the wrists, back and forth like this. Okay? If you go and watch some videos of Eric Clapton or B.B. King in particular, right? He hits a note, he'll go like... His whole hand is just flaying out like that, okay? Now this kind of hand position holds true no matter if you're playing with your third finger or your pinky or your middle finger. You're going to have that same kind of position. So if I play the 7th fret on the G string, and I turn my hand sideways, that motion is still the same as when I have my first finger doing vibrato. Right? So my side of my first finger is still locked there. And I'm trying to just nice and even with the vibrato. So for bent notes, when you vibrato these, it's a little different. We're going to have the same hand position. And our first finger is going to be locked against the side of the fretboard. You're going to bend the note up to pitch. You're going to release the pitch slowly, just a hair, not very much, and then push it back up. Again, practice this really slow at first. I think vibratoing bend notes is one of the toughest things on guitar. Again, make your way to that pitch slowly. Find it, push it back up, okay? And again, you can vary the speed on vibrato. It doesn't always have to be the same speed. You know, I might hit one note and do a really fast vibrato, and do another one that's really slow. But the key is just to keep it nice and even and consistent. Now, the final tip about vibrato I can give is when you hit a note and you're vibratoing it, vibrato all the way until the end of that note. Like right before you go to the next note in your phrase, make sure you're still doing vibrato on this note. Let me show you. Now, if I stop the vibrato, it sounds a little awkward. Doesn't sound very complete, right? Alright, so this next tip I'm going to give you, when we're soloing, we want to try to repeat some phrases once in a while. It gives the listener a chance to latch on to something that you've played. It also gives your ear a chance to kind of hear some other places you want to go. What I mean by this, if we're soloing and we just constantly do a stream of ideas that never repeat, it can sound good. But it can sort of sound like a run-on sentence, you know? So if we repeat some of those ideas a couple times, that can really give some more power to your playing. Now, one thing I did there was also to vary the phrase a little bit the second time I played it. I might change the ending of the phrase, or I might change the beginning of the phrase. Let me show you this really quick with a simple 3-note pattern. That's my phrase, okay? Just simply D to C to A. Now, I could just repeat that as is. Or I could vary that second phrase by kind of maybe changing the last note or adding on a note to the beginning of that phrase or to the end of that phrase. I'll start by changing the last note. That's a good device there. If you play a phrase that lands on a root note, try landing on the root note that's an octave above that one the second time. Now, like I said before, you can add notes into the beginning of the phrase or the end of the phrase to vary it as well. So let's try that. Right, simply there I just climbed up the scale from the A string. E, G, A, C, and then I played that phrase. Right? I could add notes on to the end. Just like that. And all of a sudden you have kind of a little catchy phrase that'll stick in people's ears. now we're going to talk about muting. Muting keeps your playing nice and clean, and it stops the dreaded open string noise from popping out when we're soloing. So let's talk about muting. We're going to talk about left hand muting and right hand muting. Both are really important. The left hand muting gets overlooked quite a bit, and let's cover this by playing an A minor pentatonic scale again. Now, the key when I play any note on the guitar, with any finger, I generally try to have that finger muting the string below it and the strings above it. So let's try this. We're going to fret the 5th fret on the G string here. So if I fretted it normally without any concerns of muting, I fret it like that. The D string is open there and it could ring out if I hit it. The B and E strings can ring out and it just would sound like a mess. So if I played a phrase like that without any muting, you can hear all those strings ringing out, and we want to try to avoid that. So what we do, when we play that first finger note, we're going to play in such a way that the tip of our first finger hits the D string and mutes it. If I pick that D string now, you can't hear it ring out, right? That's muted. The first finger will also be a little flat right here, okay? I'm not going to bar it down like when we play a chord, because then these notes might ring. If I flatten it just a little bit, these two strings will be muted out as well, okay? So, when I pick this note, my first finger is muting the D string and the B and E strings. Okay? Now, the other two strings, the E and A strings, will be muted by my right hand, and we'll cover that in the next segment. But let me talk a little bit more about left hand. Now, to achieve this, it takes a lot of really slow practice at first. I first became aware of this in an Eric Johnson interview when he talked about this muting technique, and it really helped me because whenever I played fast runs, I would always hear these kind of sounds come out. All that slop in there, and then when I learned this technique, everything cleaned up. So, what you want to do to practice this is to run through a scale. It could be any scale, but let's do A minor pentatonic to keep it simple. When you cross strings, make sure that that tip of your first finger is muting the E string when you go to the A string. Same thing when you go to the D string, the A string is going to be muted. Now, this does a couple things. It keeps it muted, but it also makes you move less with the left hand. Let me show you what I mean. If I don't try to mute, and I just move my finger over, you can see that my left hand finger is moving way farther than it would if I was muting. So my left hand first finger is jumping strings. I'm barely moving that finger. That's the case too if I play like a 3-note per string major scale. Yeah, super important technique. So now let's talk about right hand muting. The right hand for me is going to generally get the low 2 strings, especially when I'm playing up high. Now what you do is very similar to a palm muting technique. You take the side of our hand here, place it on the strings near the bridge, and that's going to mute these 3 bottom strings out for us. Now say if I want to hit a note on the B string, 5th fret, when I pick that note, you can see right here, the side of my palm is muting the E, A, D, and even part of the G string there too, right? And again, I'm going to combine the muting technique, so when I play that first finger on the 5th fret of the B string, it's going to mute the G as well. One really good exercise to check if you're muting everything properly is to rake through all these 5 strings and strike that note on the B string. Make sure no open string pops out like this. One more tip about this. When you do rake through, what you want to do is when you get to that B string, you're going to lift your hand up this way a little bit, and that note will pop out. Same thing if we did the G string. So now, especially when we're on higher strings, Now, in this case, my right hand, when I'm on that high E string on vibrato, you see this part of my thumb here is now on all these bottom 4 strings. And my first finger is muting the B string out. Okay, so if you put these two techniques together, your playing's going to stay nice and clean, and you're not going to get any of that unwanted string noise. Alright, now we're going to talk about contrast. When we're soloing, we kind of want to vary up our ideas in different ways, and that way it doesn't keep sounding the same to us or to the audience. What I mean by that is if you stay in the same register for too long, or you're playing fast for too long, or even if you're playing slow for too long, that all can get kind of boring to the ears. If you kind of change these things up and vary them back and forth, it can get really exciting. The first thing you want to try with this is just with register. Register is pitch, right? So I might play some ideas higher up and then play some ideas low. So let me show you what I mean by that. Again, I'm just using A minor pentatonic. So there, simply, I was just thinking high to low, you know, high to low and even higher and then lower again. Now, one way to make that more cohesive is to kind of repeat a melody in different octaves. Let's try that. So now it gives some cohesion to your improvisations and kind of gives some strength and power to your playing, just simply by playing things in different octaves. Okay, so another way you can contrast ideas is density. So to me, what I mean by density is kind of the notes, how many notes you're playing at a time, you know? So like fast phrases, nice and kind of long runs. Or kind of slower phrases. Now, if you vary that up, it can be really powerful, you know? You can do this in your solos by kind of maybe starting slow, nice and slow and kind of melodic, and then build up to some faster passages. Or you can do the opposite, start really fast and then kind of move to some slower things. So I'll try to show you what I mean by that. Alright, I hope these tips helped you out. I'm Ray Suhi. Check out my profile on Lessonface.com if you want to learn more about these concepts. We'll have some tab files on there and a link to this backing track that I'm going to play to as well. Alright, take care.